4 years, 750,000 dead, brother against brother. The bloodiest war in American history. A nation literally tearing itself apart over one question. Can freedom and slavery coexist? From the first shots at Fort Sumter to Lincoln's assassination, from slavery's end to Reconstruction's broken promises, this is the story of how America died and was reborn. The Civil War didn't just free 4 million enslaved people. It redefined what America meant. But the battle for equality? That was just the beginning. April 12, 1861. 4:30 in the morning. Charleston Harbor, South Carolina. Confederate artillery opens fire on Fort Sumter, a federal installation on an island in the harbor. For 34 hours, shells rain down. The 85 Union soldiers inside have no chance. On April 13th, they surrender. Miraculously, no one dies in the bombardment. But everything has changed. President Abraham Lincoln calls for 75,000 volunteers to suppress the rebellion. In response, Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina cede, joining the Confederacy. 11 states are now in open rebellion against the United States government. The nation is divided. Families are divided. In some border states, like Kentucky and Missouri, brother literally fights brother. Even Mary Todd Lincoln, the First Lady, has brothers fighting for the Confederacy. Robert E. Lee, offered command of Union armies, resigns his commission instead. He cannot fight against Virginia, his home state. I cannot raise my hand against my birthplace, my home, my children. He says, what almost everyone expects to be a short war, a few months at most, will become 4 years of unimaginable carnage. It will kill more Americans than World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam combined. It will end slavery, transform the Constitution, and reshape the nation. This is the story of the Civil War and Reconstruction, from 1861 to 1877, the years that tested whether America could survive and what kind of nation would emerge from the ashes dot in 1861. The advantages seem overwhelmingly with the North. The Union has 22 million people versus the Confederacy's 9 million, and 3.5 million of those are enslaved people who won't fight for their own oppression. The North has 90% of the nation's manufacturing, most of the railroads, a functioning Navy, more money, more everything. But the South has advantages too. They're fighting on their own territory, defending their homes. Their military tradition is strong. Many of the best officers are Southern. They only need to survive. The North must conquer and occupy. And they have Robert E. Lee, perhaps the war's most brilliant general. The North's strategy is the Anaconda Plan: blockade Southern ports, control the Mississippi River, squeeze the Confederacy economically while invading from multiple directions. The South's strategy is simpler. Survive long enough that the North loses the will to fight. If they can hold out, maybe Britain or France will recognize the Confederacy and intervene. After all, European textile mills depend on Southern cotton. The First Battle of Bull Run in July 1861 shatters Northern illusions of a quick war. Washington. Civilians actually pack picnic lunches and come out to watch what they think will be a brief skirmish. Instead, Union forces are routed, fleeing in panic back to Washington. The Confederacy is jubilant. The North is shocked. Lincoln realizes this will be long and terrible. He appoints General George McClellan to command the Army of the Potomac. McClellan is brilliant at organization and training, but fatally cautious. He constantly demands more troops, more supplies, more time. Lincoln grows frustrated. If General McClellan does not want to use the army, I would like to borrow it. In the Western theater, Ulysses S. Grant emerges as a different kind of general. At Fort Donelson in February 1862, when Confederates ask for surrender terms, Grant replies, "No terms except unconditional and immediate surrender." The press calls him Unconditional Surrender Grant. Grant captures Nashville, then pushes deeper into Tennessee. At Shiloh in April 1862, nearly 24,000 casualties in 2 days shock both sides. Grant survives calls for his dismissal. Lincoln says, "I can't spare this man. He fights." In the East, McClellan finally advances on Richmond in the Peninsula Campaign of 1862. He gets within miles of the Confederate capital, then stalls. Robert E. Lee, newly commanding Confederate forces, launches a series of attacks called the 7 Days Battles. McClellan retreats, claiming he's outnumbered. He isn't. Lee then wins its second Bull Run in August 1862. Emboldened, he invades Maryland, hoping a victory on Northern soil will bring European recognition. On September 17, 1862, the armies clash at Antietam Creek near Sharpsburg, Maryland. It becomes the bloodiest single day in American history, over 22,000 casualties in 12 hours of fighting. The battle is tactically a draw, but strategically a Union victory. Lee retreats to Virginia. More importantly, it gives Lincoln the victory he's been waiting for. From the war's beginning, the question of slavery has been complicated. Lincoln says he's fighting to preserve the Union, not to end slavery. He fears that making it an abolition. War will push the slave states of Maryland, Kentucky, Missouri, and Delaware still in the Union into the Confederacy. But enslaved people are already freeing themselves. Wherever Union armies go, enslaved people escape to Union lines. Generals don't know what to do with them. Some return them to slaveholders. General Benjamin Butler declares them contraband of war, seized enemy property, and refuses to return. Them, abolitionists like Frederick Douglass, pressure Lincoln. Make this a war to end slavery. Give it moral purpose. Let black men fight. Once let the black man get upon his person the brass letters, U.S., Douglass argues. Let him get an eagle on his button, and a musket on his shoulder and bullets in his pocket, and there is no power on earth which can deny that he has earned the right to citizenship. Lincoln moves cautiously. He personally hates slavery, always has. But he's a politician, calculating what's possible. He proposes gradual, compensated emancipation. Border states reject it. Then, after Antietam, Lincoln acts. On September 22, 1862, he issues the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. On January 1st, 1863, it takes effect, declaring all enslaved people in rebel states forever free. The proclamation is limited. It doesn't free enslaved people in Union states or areas under Union control. Lincoln uses his war powers as commander-in-chief, so he can only affect areas in rebellion. Critics call it meaningless freeing slaves, only where Lincoln has no power, but they're wrong. It transforms the war's meaning. Now the Union fights not just for reunion, but for freedom. European nations, where slavery is already abolished, can't support the Confederacy without endorsing slavery. British and French recognition never comes. Most importantly, it allows black men to enlist. By war's end, nearly 200,000 black soldiers and sailors serve in the Union military, about 10% of the total force. They fight in segregated units under white officers, receive lower pay, and face extra danger Confederates, sometimes execute captured black soldiers rather than treating them as prisoners of war. At Fort Wagner in South Carolina in July 1863. The 54th Massachusetts Infantry, one of the first black regiments, leads a suicidal assault on a Confederate fort. Nearly half are killed or wounded, including their white commander, Colonel Robert Gould Shaw. But they prove black soldiers will fight with courage equal to any. Sergeant William Carney, wounded 4 times while keeping the American flag from touching the ground, becomes the first black soldier to earn the Medal of Honor. Frederick Douglass's own sons serve in the 54th. Harriet Tubman works as a scout and spy for Union forces, even leading an armed raid that frees over 700 enslaved people. The war for the Union has become a war for freedom. July 1st, 1863. A chance encounter between Confederate and Union forces near Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, escalates into the war's largest battle. For 3 days, 165,000 men fight across fields and hills. On July 3rd, Lee orders a massive assault, 12,500 Confederate soldiers marching across open ground toward the Union center. Pickett's charge, it's called. Union artillery and rifles tear them apart. Only a few hundred reach Union lines. They're quickly killed or captured. Lee retreats, having lost a third of his army. The Confederacy will never recover. As Lee watches his shattered forces return, he says, "All this has been my fault." That same day, July 4th, 1863, Ulysses S. Grant captures Vicksburg, Mississippi, after a 6-week siege. The Confederacy is cut in half. The Mississippi River is entirely under Union control. These twin victories, Gettysburg and Vicksburg, are the war's turning point. 4 months later, in November 1863, Lincoln travels to Gettysburg to dedicate a cemetery for the fallen. Edward Everett, the main speaker, talks for 2 hours. Lincoln speaks for just over 2 minutes, 272 words. The Gettysburg Address redefines America. Lincoln reaches back to the Declaration of Independence. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Not the Constitution with its compromises on slavery, but the Declaration with its promise of equality. He frames the war as testing whether any nation conceived in liberty can long endure, and he calls for a new birth of freedom. It's one of history's greatest speeches, transforming the war's purpose from preserving an old union to creating a new one, founded on equality. In March 1864, Lincoln appoints Grant as commander of all Union armies. Grant moves his headquarters to Virginia to face Lee directly, while sending General William Tecumseh Sherman to capture Atlanta. Grant's strategy is brutal but effective constant pressure, accepting heavy casualties to grind down Confederate armies. In May and June 1864, the Overland Campaign produces staggering losses, over 50,000 Union casualties. Northern morale plummets. Newspapers call Grant a butcher. But Grant doesn't retreat like previous commanders. He keeps moving, forcing Lee to defend Richmond. By June, Grant has Lee pinned at Petersburg, beginning a siege that will last 9 months. Meanwhile, Sherman advances on Atlanta, fighting a series of battles against Confederate General Joseph Johnston. In September 1864, Atlanta falls. Sherman telegraphs Lincoln, "Atlanta is ours, and fairly won. It's perfectly timed." Lincoln faces re-election in November 1864 against his former General George McClellan, running on a platform of negotiated peace. Before Atlanta, Lincoln expects to lose. After Atlanta, victory is certain. Lincoln wins 55% of the popular vote and 212 of 233 electoral votes. Soldiers vote overwhelmingly for Lincoln. They want their sacrifices to mean something. November 15th, 1864. Sherman leaves Atlanta in flames and begins his march to the sea 300 miles to Savannah, cutting a path of destruction 60 miles wide. His army of 62,000 lives off the land, destroying railroads, burning plantations, freeing enslaved people. Its total war-making civilians feel the cost of rebellion. Sherman is deliberately breaking the South's will to fight. "We cannot change the hearts of those people of the South," Sherman writes, "but we can make war so terrible, ... that generations would pass away before they would again appeal to it. On December 21st, Sherman telegraphs Lincoln, "I beg to present you as a Christmas gift the city of Savannah." He then turns north through the Carolinas, his army leaving devastation in its wake. At Petersburg, Grant's siege slowly strangles Lee's army. Confederates are starving, deserting, running out of everything. Lee tries to break out in late March 1865, but Grant's forces are too strong. On April 2nd, Petersburg falls. Richmond, the Confederate capital, is evacuated and burns. Lee retreats west, hoping to link up with other Confederate forces. But Grant's armies are faster, cutting off escape routes. On April 9, 1865, Palm Sunday, Lee's army is surrounded near Appomattox Courthouse. He has about 28,000 men left starving, exhausted, outnumbered 5-1. Further resistance is hopeless. Lee meets Grant in the parlor of Wilmer McLean's house. Grant's terms are generous. Confederate soldiers can go home. Officers can keep their sidearms. Cavalrymen can keep their horses for spring planting. No one will be tried for treason. Lee signs the surrender. When Union soldiers begin celebrating, Grant stops them. The war is over. The rebels are our countrymen again. Over the next few weeks, remaining Confederate armies surrender. By late May, the Confederacy is gone. The war is over. The Union is preserved. Slavery is dead. But at what cost? April 14, 1865, Good Friday. Just 5 days after Appomattox, Abraham Lincoln attends a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, Our American Cousin, a comedy. He's in good spirits, talking about the future, about healing the nation. At 10:15 p.m., John Wilkes Booth, a prominent actor and Confederate sympathizer, enters the presidential box and shoots Lincoln in the back of the head. Booth leaps to the stage, breaking his leg, and shouts, "Sic semper tyrannis." Thus always to tyrants, Virginia's state motto. Lincoln is carried to a boarding house across the street. He never regains consciousness. At 7:22 a.m. on April 15th, he dies. Secretary of War Edwin Stanton reportedly says, "Now he belongs to the ages." Pause. The nation that Lincoln preserved is transformed. Over 750,000 soldiers are dead, 2% of the population. If the same percentage died today, it would be 7 million people. Tens of thousands more are wounded, maimed, traumatized. The South is devastated, cities burned, infrastructure destroyed, economy shattered, a generation of men dead or wounded. The North, too, mourns its dead, though its economy has grown during the war, and 4 million formerly enslaved people are free, but with nothing. No land, no education, no resources, and surrounded by former slaveholders determined to keep them subjugated. The war has answered one question. The Union is indivisible, and slavery is abolished. But it raises a new one. What will freedom mean? For Black Americans? The answer to that question will define Reconstruction and haunt America for generations. Even before war's end, the question looms. How do you reconstruct a nation? How do you reunite states that fought a bloody war? And most importantly, what happens to 4 million freed people? Lincoln's plan was moderate offer pardons to most Confederates who swear loyalty. Let states rejoin the Union when 10% of voters take a loyalty oath. His goal, reconciliation and quick reunification. But Lincoln is dead. Vice President Andrew Johnson, a Tennessee Democrat who remained loyal to the Union, becomes president. He's a disaster. Johnson is a racist who opposes black voting rights. He pardons thousands of former Confederates and allows them to reclaim power. Southern states pass black codes laws restricting black freedom, forcing them into labor contracts, preventing them from owning land or testifying in court. It's slavery in all but name. Congress is outraged. Radical Republicans, led by Thaddeus Stevens in the House and Charles Sumner in the Senate, want genuine equality. They pass the Civil Rights Act of 1866, declaring black American citizens with equal rights. Johnson vetoes it. Congress overrides his veto, the first time in history. Congress overrides a presidential veto on major legislation. To make these rights permanent, Congress drafts constitutional amendments. The 13th Amendment, ratified in December 1865, abolishes slavery throughout the United States. The 14th Amendment, ratified in 1868, defines citizenship. Anyone born in the U.S. is a citizen and guarantees equal protection under law. It's one of the Constitution's most important amendments, cited in countless future civil rights cases. The 15th Amendment, ratified in 1870, prohibits denying the vote based on race, color, or previous condition of servitude. These are revolutionary changes, fundamentally rewriting the Constitution. Congress also passes Reconstruction Acts in 1867, dividing the South into military districts and requiring states to write new constitutions guaranteeing black voting rights. Before rejoining the Union, for a brief, shining moment, Reconstruction seems to work. Black men vote in huge numbers. 16 black men are elected to Congress. Hundreds serve in state legislatures. Hiram Revels and Blanche Bruce become U.S. Senators from Mississippi. In South Carolina, black legislators briefly outnumber white. Black communities build schools, churches, businesses. The Freedmen's Bureau, a federal agency, provides food, medical care, and education. Freedmen's schools and historically black colleges are founded. Howard Fisk Morehouse. It's an extraordinary experiment in democracy and racial equality, unprecedented in American history. But powerful forces oppose it. White Southerners are determined to restore their power and white supremacy. They use terror. The Ku Klux Klan, formed in 1866, becomes a terrorist organization dedicated to intimidating black voters and their white Republican allies. Klansmen wear white robes and hoods, riding at night, burning crosses, whipping, lynching, murdering. They target black political leaders, teachers, anyone who challenges white supremacy. In some areas, Reconstruction governments are overthrown by violence. Congress passes enforcement acts, making it a federal crime to interfere with voting. President Grant sends troops and arrests thousands of Klansmen. For a moment, the Klan is suppressed, but Northern will is fading. The war was over a decade ago. Northerners are tired of the Negro question, tired of military occupation of the South, eager to move on. Economic depression in 1873 shifts attention to economic issues. Southern whites use economic pressure too. Black sharecroppers who vote. Republicans find themselves evicted or denied credit. White employers fire black workers who vote. Economic coercion proves as effective as violence. The 1876 presidential election becomes Reconstruction's death knell. Democrat Samuel Tilden wins the popular vote against Republican Rutherford B. Hayes. But electoral votes in South Carolina, Florida, and Louisiana are disputed. Both sides claim victory. Both sides accuse the other of fraud. The nation teeters on the brink of another crisis. Finally, a backroom deal, the Compromise of 1877. Hayes becomes president. In exchange, he withdraws the last federal troops from the South. Reconstruction is over. Without federal protection, Southern Democrats, calling themselves Redeemers, reclaim power. They pass laws disenfranchising black voters' literacy tests, poll taxes, grandfather clauses. They establish Jim Crow segregation, separate schools, separate water fountains, separate everything. All designed to degrade and control. Lynching becomes a tool of racial terror. Over 4,000 black Americans will be lynched between 1877 and 1950. The 14th and 15th Amendments remain in the Constitution, but Southern states simply ignore them. And for generations, the federal government lets them dot in 1896. The Supreme Court's Plessy v. Ferguson decision declares separate but equal, constitutional, giving legal blessing to segregation. Justice John Harlan dissents prophetically. Our Constitution is colorblind. The thin disguise of equal accommodations, ... will not mislead anyone, nor atone for the wrong this day done. But he's outvoted. Segregation becomes the law of the land for the next 58 years. 16 years. From Fort Sumter to the Compromise of 1877, a nation divided, reunited, and still struggling with its deepest contradictions. The Civil War settled fundamental questions. The Union was indivisible states cannot secede. Slavery was abolished, human beings could no longer be property. The Constitution was transformed, citizenship and equal protection became national guarantees. But Reconstruction's failure ensured that equality remained a promise unfulfilled. Black Americans were free but not equal, citizens but denied basic rights, guaranteed protection that wasn't protected. Frederick Douglass, who lived to see both. Slavery's end and Reconstruction's failure said it clearly. Slavery is not abolished until the black man has the ballot. The Civil War was America's bloodiest conflict, but it wasn't the end of the struggle. It was only a chapter. The promises made during Reconstruction, equality, justice, genuine freedom, would take another century to even begin fulfilling. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s would, in many ways, be Reconstruction's second act, finally enforcing the 14th and 15th Amendments nearly a century after their ratification in 1877. As federal troops withdrew and Reconstruction ended, Frederick Douglass warned, the Negro will be left to the ragged edge of anarchy and lawlessness. He was right. But the story wasn't over. The war had preserved the Union. Reconstruction had expanded the Constitution. Now the long, difficult work of making those promises real would continue through generations of struggle, sacrifice, and determination that the nation was reunited. But reconciliation? True equality? That battle was just beginning.